I'm explaining all this to everybody out there to understand how a record deal actually works. So you may be making, even with your record deal, you may be making only about 30 to 40 cents a record. Simple math would tell you if your budget costs you $30,000 to make it, and you're only making 30 cents a record, how many records are you going to have to sell? A lot.
Over 60,000 records?
No, you'll have to sell actually close to 600,000 records.
Damn.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And this is why, and did you know what does the average first artist sell?
I have no idea.
Nowhere close to that.
10,000?
In fact, most artists never see a royalty check until maybe their third record, if they get that lucky. Remember I went back to the publishing and I said that's where artists make their money. You know why? There's no budget on publishing. Do you remember I was talking about that? The songs you write and the lyrics you make, there's no budget there. How can they charge you for anything? That's what they owe you. Do you see where I'm telling you you make your money in publishing and not in that? It gets worse. Let's say you make your first record, you didn't sell what they thought you were going to sell, you still owe the label 50 to 100,000 records. They don't sit there and go, oh, forget about it. Let's go to the next album. You know what they do? They bill that onto your next record. So now on top of this, what you got to do to make your next album, you owe $100,000 from your last album. You see how this works now? Do you see how tough it is to actually make money that way? This is why anybody that you see out there, these rappers flossing like they just made a lot of cash, let me tell you something. Most of that is either A, rented, okay? The money that they're wearing, they're showing is rented, okay? That's not the real jewels, they just rented it to make it look that way, okay? Or B, they took that advance, which is their own money. Can you imagine if I said, here's $50,000 and you went out and spent $50,000 on a gold chain that loses money as soon as you walk out the door? Can you imagine that? But this is what most rappers do. This is why most guys are broke. Because on top of all this money that I'm giving you, you got to pay taxes to Uncle Sam on that. So you just made $50,000. There's a $50,000 check. Uncle Sam's going, by the way, I need my 20% of that. So that's basically how a record deal works. So really the way it works, it's very tough to actually make the money back to ever get a royalty check. So you have to go into a record deal thinking, I'm not going to make any money. I got signed to a record deal knowing that I wasn't probably going to make any money on the record deal. I got into it because I knew, okay, now I can go out and do the ministry God's called me because this will allow me to get into places to share Christ. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. You have to understand how it works. That's sort of the myth also with the independent labels. You ready? You back? Two more things I forgot to mention on. He had brought up a point. He said, what about if I do a show, does the record label make money on that? As of up to a couple years ago, no. They would never take a dime from your show money or endorsement money or anything outside of a record deal. They would never take money. But because the record industry right now is hurting so badly, they are now taking slices of your show money, of your endorsement money, all these things. Now, this actually brings us to this new phenomenon in hip-hop, which is ringtones. Think about ringtones for a minute. Ringtones sell for about $4 a pop, $3 to $4 a pop.
Like $2.49.
Yeah. $2.49, $3.49, whatever. The point is, that actually costs more than the average song, 99 cents iTunes downloads. So you can sell 1 million ringtones, there's no budget on ringtones, you see what I'm saying? And make a lot of money. And sell 200,000 copies of your album and make nothing. That's why guys now that are selling tons of ringtones, the labels are, even before you sign a deal, they go, okay, you only make 20% of your ringtone money, we make the other 80%. Because they have to compensate. See, now that's the thing. All these things I told you about in CD sales, remember how this was all in the context of a CD selling? CD sales are down 33% from last year.
Really?
That's not even talking over the last, that's hip-hop. Hip-hop has dropped 33% in sales.
Wow.
The record industry has dropped 10% every year for over the last 7 years. People don't buy CDs nowhere near like they used to. Now, for a person to go gold is considered platinum from 10 years ago. Because record sales are so low. Why? Because, you know, we were always talking about music industry struggling and all this stuff. This is why they're struggling, because their way of making money back in the day was CD sales. Now people don't buy CDs as much. Think of how all the major chains have shut down. There's no more Tower Records. FYE is on its way out. Virgin Records is gone.
Did you hear about Sony Pictures in Orlando got shut down?
Record stores are shutting by the boatload. Why? Because people don't buy CDs. This affects everything. Trickles down. That's how it happens. Now, you guys have brought up a good point. You said, what about independent labels? An independent label is no different than a major label. It's just they have, independent just means they're owned by themselves. So people talk about, what about Koch? You know, I heard guys making $5 a record, $7 an album, all this stuff like that. You know, these guys that get these Koch deals. You know what I'm talking about? Koch Records. They tell, oh, I make $7 a record.
I thought Koch just mainly did distribution.
They are distribution, but in other words, they'll take a lot of guys that sold a lot of records on major labels and now can't get signed, and they'll sign them and they'll sell less records, but they quote unquote make more money. But keep in mind, here's the difference with that. Yeah, you may make $5 a record, but keep in mind, now you have to pay for everything. Your expenses didn't disappear. You've got to pay the $50,000 video out of your pocket. You've got to pay for your own tour support. You've got to pay for all these things now. So yeah, you're making $5,000 a record, but your budget's still $200,000. You see what I'm saying? Now, granted, maybe you can make more money, and it's harder to get those things. You can get those indie deals and do pretty well, you know. But an independent just means it's not owned by a major label. It doesn't make the rules any different. What you start to notice now is people doing different kind of deals. Paul McCartney signed with Starbucks. He just sells his record through Starbucks.
Starbucks has a record label.
Do you know how many records he sells through there? He sells tons.
No idea.
Garth Brooks sells his records just through Walmart.
Common sells his stuff in Starbucks. He sells a lot in there.
Things are changing. The music industry is changing. It's all changing. And we're changing because I got to cut this off. So there you go.